Hello and welcome to gagrule.net. In this episode, we're going to expose another Turkish ruling elite, goes by name Mustafa Kemal Pasha, and known by Ataturk. And his atrocity, how he manipulated the British, the French, the Russians, and how he created this called Turkey from Anatolia, and this fictitious and falsified country, and on the ashes of the indigenous people, the slaughter massacre of indigenous people. And so before we start there, I want to start with this hypothetical scenario. So I want you to see what happened. You know that United States went and invaded and occupied Iraq for 10 years. So let's just hypothetically think this. If United States decided to stay and he changed the country name to, let's say, East Virginia, and he brought in laws, for example, one, that everyone in Iraq, it doesn't matter whether it's Sunni, Shia, Kurd, Arab, whatever, you pick the first letter of your first name, first letter of your last name, and you pick up an English name. Now you are American, but you cannot tell your children that you are Iraqi. Number two, if he changed all the cities' name to an American or English name, and if he changed the alphabet from Arabic to English, if he goes around, you know, there was insurgency, Sunnis, he goes and uproot all the Sunnis, men, women, children, deport them to the desert to their dead. And if he destroy all mosques and build church on top of it, what would you say? What would Turkish people say if United States did this? And what would the world people say about this? So bear this in mind as we go through this video, so that you understand this atrocity of this guy, Kemal Pasha, which is, we're going to call it Ataturk because everybody knows by that name. Now, you know that the American President Woodrow Wilson, he never wanted to do anything with the Middle East. He wanted, because the Arab, they were just liberating themselves from the Turks. So the evil were the Turks, the Anatolia. He wanted to partition the Anatolia, not the Middle East. But here is, look at what Woodrow Wilson plan was, how he drew the map. Here is, watch this. So it was King and Queen Commission. This was American recommendation for post-Ottoman Middle East 1919. Woodrow Wilson was the 28th president, led America through the World War I, and crafted the Versailles Treaty. And he's the one who created the League of the Nation and the women's rights and all that stuff. I mean, he was not like one of today's presidents. He had lots of vision. So here is how he drew the plan. The Constantinople, which is now they call them Istanbul, where the British and French, they wanted to liberate, okay? So that will become international. Armenia will have, Western Armenia go back to Armenia. The Kurds will have autonomy. The Syria will stay as is. And also the Mesopotamia will stay as is. So what happened to this plan? And they were not only the American president was doing this, and the American people, they were with Armenians, others, to help them, liberate them from this Turkish atrocity. Here, listen to this for a minute.
During the period of the genocide in 1915, there was tremendous response from the U.S. Writers, religious, and political leaders such as H.L. Mencken, Ezra Pound, Theodore Roosevelt, Woodrow Wilson, Rabbi Stephen Wise, and William Jennings Bryan all spoke out for the Armenian cause. Former President Roosevelt described the events as the greatest crime of the war. In addition, a charity called the Near East Relief Foundation sent over $100 million in aid to the starving Armenians, as they were known. $1.3 billion in today's currency. So thoroughly were the Armenian massacres covered in the press that in 1915 alone, the New York Times ran 145 articles, and the reporting was clear. This was government-planned, systematic race extermination.
The Armenians have been living in their homeland since history first began, as resilient as an ancient tree. Then, in the spring of 1915, the tree was felled. The annihilation of a race was an act for which no word existed. Even now, the true name of genocide is silence. On September 3rd, 1915, the silence was broken by a single man. Appalled by reports of the atrocities, U.S. Ambassador to Constantinople, Henry Morgenthau, sent out an urgent request for emergency relief to save the lives of Armenians and other nationalities uprooted in the Ottoman collapse. On September 16th, Near East Relief was born. Under the leadership of James Barton and Cleveland Dodge, and with the support of the American people, Near East Relief built a vast network of refugee camps and orphanages, served by volunteers from all across the United States. By 1930, $117 million worth of aid had been provided, and 132,000 lives saved, in the greatest humanitarian effort the world had ever known.
This degree of international philanthropic relief and intervention of sorts in a catastrophic human rights drama that was happening 8,000 miles away was something new.
It was an example of the basic philanthropic impulse in the American people. It suddenly rose up with this Armenian genocide. But it's been fairly well forgotten, I think. I don't know how many people would have any knowledge what it was.
Before long, the Armenians had gone from a people nobody had ever heard of to a household name throughout the country.
Clean your plate. Think of the starving Armenians. My mother said this to me and my brothers every time we sat down to a meal. And that lived in my mind ever after. That's the first thing I could remember her saying to me. Clean your plate. Think of the starving Armenians. Now, I couldn't have been the only person in the United States who had that experience.
All of America was mobilized, from Park Avenue to Main Street. Citizens young and old and of every faith and denomination answered the call, sending clothes, food, money, and prayers for a far-off people in need.
What happened to this plan? They were going to partition Turkey, Anatolia, and American people were all with the Armenian and the Syrian and the Kurds and all those people. They wanted to save them. So what went wrong? As you could see there, Mesopotamia is still there, Syria is there. They didn't want to touch any of that. They would be under their mandate, but they were not going to partition to Iraq, Kuwait, Jordan, and all that stuff. Okay, let's just take a few minutes, talk about this World War I, when the British and French, they wanted to liberate Constantinople, and what happened, and who took the credit, and whose ingenuity was. So here it is, just a few minutes. So here is this. This is what called Gallipoli campaign, and that this guy Ataturk got the credit, and they call him the popular guy. But the truth of the matter is, it was this guy, the German. This was German ingenuity. It was German General Otto von Sanders. And he was the advisor for the military commander for the Ottoman Empire, and he was almost running the show. So what really he did is he knew the French, the British Navy technology, basically their turret, right? So he knows the angle of the turret, how far, how high it could go. So he fortified the Turkish position so high, and so the Turks were able to hit the British and the French, sink their ships, and of course he fortified the harbor, and that's how the French and the British were defeated, and the thanks goes to this German general. It was his, and it was a German ingenuity. It's nothing to do with this guy Ataturk, but obviously he was the leader, he took the credit, and that's the way how things work. So now, what happened to the American Woodrow Wilson plan? Well, here is what happened. The snake oil salesman Ataturk, he makes secret deal with British, courtesy of British Petroleum, who was called Anglo Petroleum. So he talked to the British. He says, look, if you let us stay here and you give us amnesty, whatever you want, we'll do. And you could have all Middle East for you, because at that time, the Arab was revolting against the Turks. So he knew he's not going to win anyway. So he made secret deal with the British. And also, what happened? Everything has to be right timing, right? Woodrow Wilson dies. So Woodrow Wilson dies, and so what happened after that is this new president get elected. It's called Warren Harding. Harding presidency was overshadowed by the criminal activity of some of his cabinet members. In one infamous incident known as Teapot Dome Scandal, Secretary of Interior Albert Fall rented public land to oil companies in exchange for gift and personal loan. Fall was later convicted of accepting bribe and spent less than a year in jail. Other government officials took payoff and embezzlement and so on and so forth. So it was the most corrupt president at that time. So the British now start to lobby the United States, because now the oil barons are running the country, and British Petroleum, and then in United States there was Standard Oil, and they promised the Standard Oil they're going to have a piece of the wells in Iraq, and so the Americans completely dropped the partition of the Anatolia, and the Turks and the British, they become now allied. They were enemies. The Turks were calling jihad on the British and the French. Now they become allies. So as you could see, they got the Mesopotamia, the British and the French, and they carved them up to their satisfaction. And so this is how successfully this Ataturk manipulated the British and French and got off his back and occupied them with carving and conquering the Middle East. So now he turned around. He did the same deal with Russians. And so he offered them same thing, the Caucasus. And here is, you could just see, it was courtesy of the communism, and that was the deal because, you know, like a Caucasus has always been changing hands between the Russians and the Persians. So the Turks, for them, was great. Let's put Russia being border with the Persians, which is the Iranian. And so he just sold they made secret deal again with, they give it Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan, all to the Russia. And so why not? Russia was happy with it too, because they got more than what they bargained for it. And so Armenia tried to fight, but obviously, as you could see, that pink one, they couldn't succeed. But that was not enough. The Turks also give it a bonus to the Russians. It's their motherland, which is Central Asia, the Turkmenistan, the Uzbekistan, all this. And that's how Ataturk really, technically speaking, invented Soviet Union, because the Russians had now all these countries. They need to name it, so they called them Soviet Union or USSR. So what the people really don't understand is, the Turks are the only non-indigenous people of the region. You see, the Persian, the Armenian, the Arabs, the Kurds, the Greek, the Bulgarian, the Assyrian, and many others, they are all indigenous people of the region. Turks, they came in as invaders. They were never indigenous. They were empire. So they basically, the British and the French and the Russians, just give it to Anatolia, ignored all those indigenous people, said, okay, since we have Mesopotamia and Syria, you could have the Anatolia. We don't care about this. So basically the British and the French, they dropped all the indigenous people. Instead of, at the beginning, they were helping the Arab, so they become the conqueror of the Arab. They partitioned the Arab lands. This is how evil the British and French were. So they were just as bad as this Ataturk is. So therefore, Anatolia is invaded country by the Turks. It's not. I repeat, it's not a country. The Turks never had a country. They were invading power. They were called Ottoman Empire. They were not a country. So how could you convert an empire to a country? So it's a falsified, fictitious country. So I just wanted to clarify this so people will understand. Okay? So basically now we're going to talk about what this Ataturk did to Anatolia once he kept his enemies busy conquering and carving, and so he turned on Anatolia. Now he's to cover up all the crimes or was committed by their predecessor, the Talat Pasha and War Pasha and others, and he will cover it up by bringing in some new rules and laws. And here's where we're going to talk about the rules and laws. Okay, so now let's talk about this partitioning, what he did. So as you know, we talked about these three criminals. They did the legwork of completely wiping out the Christians from Anatolia, the Armenian, the Syrian, and Bulgarian, and Greek, and all that. So basically, they did the legwork for this criminal organizations, and they flee. So now this Ataturk has to cover up. So how do he cover up, and how do he create this zombie Turk that they will not know anything what is going on? So here is what he did. Of course, this is the map of Armenian route genocide, how they went village by village. They brought people, took over man, woman, children, sent them to the Syrian desert to their death. So those, as we repeat, these three criminals, they did their jobs.
This recently discovered film is another piece of evidence. It's possibly the only surviving footage of the actual deportations. It shows Armenian orphans on the march towards Syria. Many of these children were raped or murdered. Others were sold to Bedouin tribesmen. Most perished in the caves of Deir ez-Zor.
So this was the historic Armenia before the Turks even been in the region. This was those provinces where historic Armenia was. And of course, the Turks, they came, they invaded, they, wiped out, slaughtered, massacred the whole people. The Turkish invasion, as you could see, that one in the right, a little bit the yellowish, that's currently the Armenia. The rest was completely wiped out, which is called Western Armenia. And so what he did, now he has this Anatolia, so he put this iron curtain around Anatolia, and he did exactly the scenario I gave you. He first things he did, in 1923, he changed the name Anatolia to Turkey, which is Turkey never existed. They were invaded, they were occupiers. And then he changed the major cities' name, like Constantinople become like Istanbul, and Smyrna become Izmir, and so on and so forth. And then he changed name of everyone in Anatolia, and whether you're Muslim, non-Muslim, to Turkishness. And this is what this Ataturk did. And so for example, if your name was Harutun Najarian, his name become Hamid Nazim, and that's how they had to pick up the first letter of the first name and the last letter, first letter of their last name, and pick up a Turkish name. And now they're Turk. They cannot tell anybody that, even their children, they are not Turk. That's what you have now in Turkey, this so-called 70 million. Only 10% are really Turks. The rest, they were all the population, they Turkified them. And this is their atrocity, how this Ataturk played this game. So what other things he did is he literally took Islam, he threw it under the bus. He changed Arabic alphabet to Ottoman, the Ottoman, which was Arabic, to Latin. Why he did that? Two reasons. One, to keep the British happy, because he promised the British he's going to change everything. Two, to create these zombie Turks. They grow up generation after generation, have no idea what happened there, where they were Armenian, they were anybody else. As you remember, the Turks, the Kurds were called mountainous Turks. 15 million Kurds, they could not even say they were Kurds. In fact, they were so tormented, even the Kurdish children, they made them to wear a red, this is how brutal they were. They made them to wear a red. So this is their atrocity, this Ataturk atrocity, what he did. And that's why you see now 99.9% of Turks, they can't read the Ottoman alphabet. And that's why they don't know anything. What happened? And they just, every time you meet them, they read the line of their government lie, whatever they did at the school. So here's, we're going to show you again, here is Halil Bertekay to tell you what else he did.
What this new Turkish state then did was, it embarked on an all-out program of westernization, adopting a Western-style constitution, adopting secularism, dropping the old Arabic-inspired alphabet in favor of the Latin script, adopting Western-style dress, costume, the civil code, everything. As a result, Britain, France, Germany, everybody else, they were now out to court this new Turkey to try to become friends with it, and the great powers did not have any interest in pursuing the dirty matter of what had happened in 1915. And all kinds of reasons like this made it undesirable for the young republic to maintain an honest memory of what had been done in 1915. And as a result, you have an enormously constructed, fabricated manipulated national memory.
So as you could see, this is lots of Turkish intellectuals and historians are coming and saying this is what happened, but obviously the zombie Turks, you explain to them because they still, well, of course, before they were afraid even to use word genocide. Now they could at least say genocide because they're using it on other people, the word genocide. Before we're not allowed word genocide even to use it. Now, so this guy atrocity. This is how they created this falsified country called Turkey. Turkey is fictitious name. An empire cannot become a country. And that's why everybody has to understand this, you know. So here's one more thing. So now what he did is, so that he owned now Anatolia, he changed the name. So what happened is, if you look this map, you see that circle, green circle, and in the middle there is gray. So he projected Istanbul as a Turkey around the world. So everybody who traveled goes to Istanbul says, oh, I went, such a nice country, people. But they forget that Istanbul always was Western civilization. And so Istanbul became a refuge because he, in Istanbul, gave them more freedom, more talking, more things, because a foreigner comes in. But the rest of Anatolia, it was like a hell for everybody. He forced this Turkishness, Turkification. And so this is why the people in Anatolia saw the opportunity to flee to Istanbul, because including Turkish intellectuals and whoever survived the genocide, so they made their way to Istanbul. That's why you see Istanbul is today, the population, that area that you could see is 1/3 of this entire Anatolia, because people were fleeing there to flee out. And so that's how this Turkish intellectuals, they went out in Germany, other places, and now they're speaking out about the Armenian genocide and all this atrocity that the Turks created. So that's how he created this Zombie Turks. So there you could see he invented Zombi Turks, and this is the problem we're having with dealing with the Turkish people. And every time you talk, because they don't know. I mean, I don't get upset when I talk to them. But here is, I'm going to show you in a few minutes how the Turkish people that I had a chance to meet with them and ask them, you know, when at their lifetime, when or how old were they when they got to know about Armenian genocide. Okay, so here is, I'm going to show you the people that I met, Turkish intellectuals, the people who educated themselves, learned, studied about what happened, listen to them, and we'll come back. How old were you when you came to know Armenian genocide?
I was, I think, 38, 39. Until that time, I had no idea. I didn't know it. I learned first in Georgia when I was working on a different project. I think I wrote, and I told you enough, until 1988, when I started working in Hamburg in that institute, I even didn't know that there are Armenians living in My first Armenian friend was Hayel. He passed away of cancer. He who introduced me to the land, and they all came to me after the publication of my first book. This is how I learned the Armenians. I didn't know before that.
Let me start asking this question.
Go ahead.
For the Turkish gentleman, at what age that you become familiar with Armenian genocide?
That's a good question.
So the question was, how old were you when you first learned about the Armenian genocide?
Well, if it is just an answer from my perspective, it would be not so satisfactory, but I will say that this is the position of many Turks or citizens of Turkey. You have to know that a very high percentage of people in Turkey are themselves not from Anatolia. So my grandmother came to Anatolia in 1924 and had never in her life met an Armenian or didn't know anything about Armenian genocide. Okay? So many people are that way. For these people today, they are discovering that Asia Minor had a plurality of ethnicities and cultures and religions, and that Turkey, today's Turkey, has to recognize these pluralities once again, and as we heard now, Edmund Minasyan mentioned it, that there has to be some kind of restitution, that is, some kind of peace has to come in. So for that reason, in my case, I, of course, was a believer of Turkish nationalism. I was an elementary school teacher in my youth, and I would have refused vehemently if anybody said that Turks committed the genocide. But mind you, my parents were not in Asia Minor, okay? But since I live in Germany, and I hold a German passport, I feel today responsible for the Holocaust. This is also something that you can explain morally, just like many Armenians, members of Armenian diaspora in the United States, I believe, feel also responsible to what happened in American history to the native populations or whatever. So this is the requirement of being a citizen. So we are trying today to instill in people in Turkey this feeling. For example, a Kurd colleague or friend can easily come up and say, we are the victims, why should we be responsible for what happened to the Armenians? But if they feel as citizens of Turkey, then they have to also accept that there is a collective moral responsibility. So this is our position today in Turkey, how we are trying to teach people or create an empathy for the situation, for the problems. I hope this. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, this is Sabiha Sancar from Turkey, Istanbul, from Turkish Economic and Social Studies Foundation.
So what brought you here?
Well, we have been working on Turkey-Armenian relations for the last almost like 10 years, for 8 years, since 2006. It was first when I went to Armenia, and since then we have been very active at the civil society side to engage dialogue with the Armenians, and now we have very good friends and colleagues in Armenia. And then since the last 2 years also we are trying to engage into this dialogue with the Armenian diaspora, Armenian communities living outside of Armenia, and that's why we are here.
So tell me about your history. You were just telling us about how do you got, at what age or what time you become familiar with that?
Actually, as it was described in the panel, I mean, we had actually, let me put it that way.
We're talking about you personally.
Yes, we had a very one way of reading of history in Turkey. So till I went to Netherlands for my graduate studies, I only had one narrative of reading of what has happened while during the establishment of the Republic, during Anatolian history, establishment of the civilizations and whatever. And in that class, there was a discussion of this, and everyone was referring at the Armenian genocide, the second. It wasn't a really Turkey-Armenia class. It has nothing to do with it. But the discussion came like that. I didn't really react very negatively, but of course I was offended with the discussions there. And at the end of the class, the professor told me that, Sabia, we need to talk with you. And he gave me a list of readings that saying that just make these readings and then come to me. We'll talk with you again. I went to the library. I found out those readings. It was the first time that I was reading so opposite narrative that I was used to. And I read all of these. I went to the professor. We had a couple of discussions with him, saying that he said that I'm not saying that this is wrong or this is right, but there are different readings in the history. So I think you're old enough to learn these different readings, and this was my first introduction. Let me say that is a different narrative, and I was 22, I was at 22, something.
All right, so you saw that. Those are the Turk who they educated themselves, they did their own research, they're talking about it, they're recognizing Armenian genocide. So now we're going to show you a little bit of, which I call them Zombi Turks, because they have no idea, no clue what happened to the Armenian. They never told them anything. Or they told them Armenian, they were good people. Or they told them we came here and they left, and went to their countries, like Armenian countries, in Argentina, in US, in France, in Iraq, in Syria, Lebanon, all those were Armenian countries, they went there. So here is how to look at, and then after that, you're gonna see how Hitler admired Ataturk. He was his idolized him. It was because he not only copied those three criminals before what they did to Armenia, he was admiring what this guy did. So somebody who wrote a book, and so we just took a couple of those words from the book. I want you to read it and see it, and just after those zombies you see. Here we go.
In Turkey, I traveled in search of a vanished people. I'd heard the official history, but now I was traveling to the places where Armenians had once formed vibrant communities. This is the area near Van in eastern Turkey, which was at the heart of Armenian life. Armenian families once crossed this lake to attend Mass at one of the most sacred Christian sites in the Middle East. Here on Akhtamar Island, evidence of a rich Armenian heritage. An Armenian king built the first church here in the 10th century. Some Turkish sightseers, a young couple from nearby Van. They were citizens of a modern secular republic. I wondered what they'd been taught about the past.
Do you know what happened to the Armenians in this area?
What happened?
Yes.
When they were here, we and they, like a brother or like a sister, a friendship together. But I don't know what happened, and they went their countries, and we stayed here.
This area is full of villages once occupied by Armenians. Today, the population is largely Kurdish.
So when you were growing up in this village, did you hear from your forefathers, did you learn at school about how the Armenians were massacred? Did you learn any of that?
We never heard anything like that. Our fathers say there were no massacres against the Armenians. But we do hear about massacres now. We never heard anything bad about the Armenians at school. We were told they were advanced technologically and in human rights and things like that. They were a civilized people. I went to school for 11 years and never heard anything bad about Armenians.
If I was going to get any sense of what had happened, I would have to speak to one of the older people.
Hello, how are you? We'd like to ask you if you remember anything about the Armenians who used to live here. Did you learn anything about them?
When we arrived here, the Armenians were leaving. I was young then, like these children. They were leaving when we arrived, and we settled here.
People speak nowadays of a great slaughter of the Armenians, that the Turks tried to slaughter them. What do you remember of that time? Is that true? Was there a great slaughter?
I don't know about that. We came from Russia fighting on the way. We came here and they left.
Now we're going to show you the good things, how Hitler admired Ataturk. So it says, the Turkish experience also confirmed the Führer, which is leader, ideal for Nazi propagandists. The example of Ataturk and the Turkish Republic apparently showed that one nation united under a Führer offered a path to greatness according to Goebbels. You see that? Yes, teacher. It says Ataturk offered proof that history was made by a great man. Neither the mass nor democracy offered a way to greatness. Only Führer. Hitler described the Turkish Führer as the shining star in the dark 1920 December. You see that? This is Hitler is saying. Okay? You need to buy this book and read it. And a bust of the Turkish leader was one of the most cherished possessions through, although Hitler's own words on Ataturk were not plentiful, they were always admiring. In 1938, he even observed that Ataturk was a teacher. Mussolini was his first and his second student. So there you go. So that even Hitler admired him, Stalin admired him. So this is when I gave you a scenario, hypothetical scenario in the beginning of this video, and as you could see how Ataturk put that scenario in practice. That's how he created this falsified, fictitious country called Turkey and the ashes of those indigenous people who were living there before. So thank you for watching, and our next video we're going to talk how to partition Turkey. And again, thank you and have a nice day.